here when everything gets so rainy. But hopefully, hindi po maging rainy yung love life at saka yung learning life natin. Noel, andyan ka na ba?
Yes, miss, I'm here.
Kumusta ang love life at learning life natin?
Yung love life, miss, medyo pagtuyot, char.
Pagtuyot.
Ano yun? Yung learning naman, marami naman po tayong na-learn ngayon, especially with these webinars that TLRC and TTBDO is offering.
Okay. Hi po dyan, Ma'am Sheila. Isang napakamaulang umaga pala sa kanila dyan. Yesterday po, napakamaulan po dito sa Cebu. But right now, it's a really good day. I think it's gonna be sunny whole day. Okay. Noel, to start it off, I'll give you the floor for our reminders.
All right. So good morning again, everyone. So before we proceed with the webinar proper, I'm here to remind you with some webinar tickets to follow during our webinar proper. So ayan. So this today's webinar is organized by the Teaching and Learning Resource Center of UP Cebu in cooperation with Technology Transfer and Business Development Office, where our speaker is currently the head. And this our speaker, Sir Jason, good morning also. So here are the webinar etiquettes or webinar reminders for today. So this webinar will be recorded. We will be keeping tab of the proceedings for this webinar for documentation purposes. You are free to leave if you feel uncomfortable that this session will be recorded. So furthermore, mute your microphone during the talk. We want to make sure that the speaker's voice is clear to everyone. We may opt to remove you if you don't follow this request. So also refrain from taking pictures or videos of the talk. If you do so, you will be held accountable of data privacy violations if the copy you created leaks into other internet outlets. We wish to keep the identity of our participants private, and so is yours. Avoid using the annotation tool. Once the annotation tool is activated, you might unconsciously swerve your arrow towards the speaker's presentation and draw unnecessary lines that may block the participant's view on some texts and images on the slides. And if you have questions for later, or if you have questions while the talk is ongoing, you may put them in the chat box. So after the talk, you will have the chance to ask your questions, but we wish for you to only use the chat box rather than voice because of our time constraint. And also don't forget to evaluate. Your inputs on the webinar will help us improve our next webinars. Please do not forget to evaluate after you have answered the forms, you will be given a proof of participation. So the evaluation link will be opened right after the webinar and shall remain open for only 15 minutes. And our webinar is currently live streaming on our YouTube channel, TLRC UP Cebu. For those watching through our YouTube channel, you will get your proof of participation by staying until the end of the session. We will be announcing the instructions of the live chat, so please stay tuned. And if you want to contact us or simply get updated with our future webinar and trainings, you may follow us at our Facebook page, Teaching and Learning Resource Center, University of the Philippines, Cebu. You may also subscribe to our YouTube channel, TLRC UP Cebu, where you may review our past webinars. Also, you may visit our official website, tlrc.upcebu.edu.ph, or email us at lrc.upcebu@up.edu.ph. Okay, so to introduce our speaker for today, I will give the stage to Sir Mike.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ms. Je. Thank you, Ms. Noel.
Morning, Mike.
Madam Ganra.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yung internet signal ko is intermittent at the moment. Okay, so it's my honor to introduce our resource speaker this morning. So our resource speaker finished his undergraduate in mathematics degree at the university in Mindanao State University in Iligan Institute of Technology in Iligan City. A few months after graduation, he went to Cebu City to try his luck and has his first job writing business and financial stories for a knowledge process outsourcing company. It was there that he gained the appreciation of what the internet can offer and how systems can be made efficient. He then served as a faculty member of the University of the Philippines, Cebu. It was during his time in the university that he became appointed to head the Computing Services Unit, the office that would later become the ITC, or the Information and Technology Center. It was also in UP Cebu where he became registered as a patent agent under the ITSO, or the Information Technology Security Officer Program, along with becoming a technology transfer consultant for UP Cebu in it. He then went to the private sector to work as a data analyst for a business process outsourcing company handling information on workers' compensation. After that, he worked as a specialist for another BPO focusing on intellectual property rights. His return to UP Cebu started by being a consultant to the ITSO and then later becoming the project leader of the first ever National TBI Summit under the UP Cebu in it. He formally became one of the administrative staff of the university in March 2019 under the Technology Transfer and Business Development Office. In addition to being a staff at the TTBDO, he also serves as the patent officer of UP Cebu, managing the university's IP portfolio and helping various clients with their intellectual property concerns. He also manages the TBI of UP Cebu in it as it helps local startups to grow. His various expertise include intellectual property, information technology, IP protection, and valuation of software and innovation. To talk this morning about business and trademark, everyone, let's give a virtual applause to Mr. Jason Nieva. Good morning, Sir Jazz.
Morning, Michael. Good morning,
Good
Jera.
morning, Sir Jazz.
Good morning, Noel.
Morning, Sir Jazz.
Thank you for that introduction. No? So, okay, let's start. If we have time, basta may questions, no?
It's okay, sir.
Okay, so as mentioned, I'll be discussing about trademarks and business, no, on basically on how it impacts the business, but the initial part of our discussion is I'll be going through the different concepts now as it relates to trademarks, and hopefully I'll give the examples I included will be enough also not to at least give you an idea of how powerful trademarks are. And the reason we decided to have this training now is similar last time. For those of you who were able to attend, we discussed copyrights. And like copyrights now in the country, trademarks is not yet that solid, it's not that strong, especially when we go to the MSME level. Hindi pa siya ganun talaga ka-appreciated ang trademarks, but it has a lot of potential. Just to review, no, what Michael said, so I'm currently serving as the patent officer of the university. In addition to intellectual property, I'm also involved in innovation and startups. And for those of you know, in your respective universities, schools, organizations, or company, if you want to know more about intellectual property, or if you want to invite me as research speaker, just email me at itso.upcbo, and then we'll arrange the session. So okay lang. Okay, so let's start now. So what is a trademark? Basically, under R 8293, it's covered under sections 1 to sections 169, and the complete name is actually trademarks, service marks, and trademark service marks. The difference being when trademarks kasi is goods, and then service marks, of course, service. So if you're a BPO, for example, and then my logo ka, then that's a service mark because you're offering services. No? But if you're offering goods, then it's a trademark. So usually this is the TM, and if you're wondering, if you see some logos nga may TM, that means they're filing for trademark. So how do you know that the trademark has been approved? That's when you see the R inside a circle, meaning it has been registered. So meaning when you see the TM, it's still being filed. So once you actually file the trademark, you can write the TM. But once it's registered, you can then change it to R. So that's the differences in the symbols. So in general, under the law, a trademark is a word, a group of words, sign, symbol, or logo. And the purpose is it identifies your good, your specific good of one entity from others, and differentiates it. Because that's what we want, no? While we're okay to have different kinds of restaurants, for example, of course, we want the customers to be able to differentiate. Okay, this restaurant is offering this kind of food or services, then this and so. And one way to identify that is through logos, symbols, or in general as trademarks. So again, it's a word. It can be a symbol or a combination. No? So some of the examples I have here kay mga food, because it's very easy naman to find trademarks din for food, especially for mga local na versions. So generally, going back to the definition, you can register a 3D mark and trademark. But the key here is that in order for your trademark to be approved, your application to be approved, there has to be a distinctiveness of mark. It has to be distinct enough that people can differentiate your mark from other marks. So that being the case, it also means that if the trademark you're applying for is pretty similar to an already existing trademark, then hindi siya ma-distinctiveness. And under the code, currently, sound marks and scent marks are not yet available for registration. For in some countries now, they allow na shapes to be just 3D mark for some, but shapes is allowed na for trademark. And one example of that is ang Nutella na container. Because diba, if you see the container, even if it doesn't have any logo, you immediately associate it with Nutella. So you can trademark that shape. The favorite, I don't know, I think even everyone's favorite Valentine's gift, diba, Ferrero, the shape is unique enough, so you can trademark that. So one of the things that most people forget is there's actually a first to file rule, meaning if you're the first to file for the registration, then you're going to own the legal rights. So ikaw yung may-ari na, kasi ikaw yung first na nag-file. So that's why I always advise people na if you have a really good a name for a business, let's say a food business, if you're not yet sure whether you want to proceed to that business, 50-50 ka pala, then maybe wag mo muna i-reveal yung name, or you file a trademark, then you reveal. Because let's say you put it on social media na I have this idea for a bakery and I want this name. Kasi hindi ka nag-file kagad, may nakita ng post mo. Siya nag-file siya. So by the time you file, wala na. No? You don't own the rights to that trademark kasi naunahan. Like a lot of intellectual property rights, trademark is also territorial in nature, meaning when you file in the Philippines, you're generally protected lang sa Philippines, no? So limited lang siya. Unless, of course, your brand or your trademark has grown to a point na it's become really famous. So one example is, let's say, Jollibee. So Jollibee has a trademark in the Philippines. It's possible na they really don't need to file, for example, in Malaysia because they're world known. But of course, if you really want to protect your trademark, you have to file. But in their case, they have the advantage because they're known na kasi. So a lot of people know what Jollibee is, what it offers, what's the logo. So that's an advantage. And you will see later in some of our examples that that's actually the case. So one of the things that's what personally what one of the things that I find unique in RA 8293 when it comes to trademark is that the provisions generally focus on what trademarks you can file, no? Unlike, for example, sa copyright, they start with what materials you can copyright, and then later na nila sinabi na ito yung mga hindi pwede. So generally in trademark, they started with ano yung mga hindi mo dapat pwede i-register. Then parang unique siya because it's also telling us na you pretty much can have any name, as you also see later, but ito yung mga bawal mo. We won't go through everything, but I'll go through some that I think is somewhat crucial then in our discussion. So number one, immoral, deceptive, or scandalous matter, which is really considered. This is a bit of subjective. The first part, because who can determine immorality and deceptiveness? But most likely, if this is the case, it has to go to the court. But there's also another part which disparage or falsely suggests a connection with persons, not living or dead, and even institutions. And there was this case, I think, way back. So gumawa sila ng wine and they associated it with certain heroes, so si Rizal, si Boni, si Gumburza. So of course, nag-file ng opposition yung mga tao because, diba, that's not a good way because you're suggesting na okay, this kind of wine is Rizal, diba, para. So this kind is Boni, and if you notice, one of the wine in the top mo side is Tacloban, and they actually face difficulty in that, no? Kasi at that time, I think they registered the trademark, I think just 4 or 5 months after Yolanda. So para bang they were implying bang if you drink this Tacloban, you're going to be resilient, diba? Parang it's falsely suggesting a connection with an institution. It's Tacloban. Kasi diba, of course they experienced the disaster, but they were also resilient. So parang ginamit siya, diba? Na parang they tried to bank on this nature of Tacloban. So Tacloban. But of course, it was eventually disapproved. So that's one of the reasons. But as you'll also see later, it's not really that easy then to disapprove or approve. One exciting case about let's go back now sa scandalous in matter, etc. This is in the US, so it's in the Philippines. This is the Slants. So they're actually an American dance rock band composed of Asian Americans. So they found a name for their band name, diba? The Slants. And initially, it was rejected by the USPTO and disparaging to Asians. Diba? Diba, slant, refers to the eyes, diba? Especially the Chinese, the slant. So of course, the members, they fought it out. And eventually, it reached the Supreme Court and decided in the favor of the band. Yes, it's a bit, it may be disparaging, but the US they value their First Amendment, which is the freedom of expression. And the argument was also, this was a way for Asians to take back a negative connotation. Yes, the slants is a negative, but we're turning it into something positive. So what we're saying is here, like I mentioned, when we talk about Manggod, values like immorality, scandalous, deceptive, subjective talaga. So it's going to be up to you, no? To if you really think this trademark is really good and won't really be disparaging to other people, then you can defend that. But of course, that also means na you'll be spending also, no? It's pupunta kasi sa court kasi, diba? You'll have to defend it in court. So depende if approve yung in the Philippines ang IPO, good for you. But if may nagreklamo, then you have to go to court. But in their case, they got approved, so they own the trademark for the slants. So that's a very good approach to the problem. Of course, you can trademark na usually pag obvious na Philippine or mga flags, no? Kasi that's not allowed. And you also can use mga name and portrait of especially a living individual unless you have the written consent of the widow. No? If you notice, ang widow talaga. So, a deceased president. So, that's meaning hindi mo pwede i-trademark. So, I'm sure many of us, di ba, during our elementary years, nakita natin yung mga pictures ng president sa classrooms natin. So, I mean, technically, you can sell the pictures, but hindi mo pwede i-trademark, di ba, na parang the Osmeña, or the, sino pa mga president, the Manuel Rojas, etc. So, hindi mo siya pwede i-trademark unless the widow or sometimes the family might consent. Okay. So, for example, gawa ka ng boxing gloves and you want to name it Manny, which obviously you're banking on the popularity of Manny Pacquiao, then you have to write the consent, get the consent of the family. And in this case, it will mean, of course, they probably give you consent if they get some royalty. So, dyan napapasok yung mga deals when it comes to trademarks. You also can use, as mentioned earlier, if the registered mark is the same goods, closely related, or resembles the mark. Remember, it has to cause confusion. Yun ba, malilito kasi yung tao. Akala nila ito yun, pero hindi pala. Diba? So, I got some images on the internet. So, let's say, Mang Inasal. We're all familiar with Mang Inasal, the Andy Rice, for some people, they really like the oil, which ako personally, ayaw ko sa oil. Ibang oil na sa baboy ako na oil. But anyway, so Mang Inasal. Now, I think this is in Qatar or Dubai. So they have this Mang Inasal. So it's also a food, but it's similar in sound. But as you can see, obvious and differences. So if I didn't check, I think wala siya trademark. But if you were to file a trademark, yung Mang Inasal in this version, pwede siya ma-approve. Kasi even if it's also selling food or a restaurant, it's unique enough, it's distinct enough na hindi ka talaga ma-confuse, diba, na Mang Inasal. You'll find it probably funny. Pareho, lang ginamit lang nila, but they have something different. But let's say your logo is something like this. Diba? Mang Inasal. So, chances are, the one on the right, hindi talaga siya ma-approve kasi it really resembles the first mark. So meaning, if I were to put this up in downtown area of Cebu, for example, chances are people will enter kasi, diba, they think they're going to Mang Inasal, especially if ang taas-taas ng signage mo, maliit yung font. So they think, uy, yellow, red, Mang Inasal, tapos pagpasok nila, hindi pala, diba? Hindi pala siya Mang Inasal. So, meaning, you've already caused confusion. So, there's that infringement. So, yan yung sa trademark na you have to remember na. Once it causes confusion, then you're likely infringing on the trademark. Okay. So, careful sa ganyan. So, you never know, yung Mang Inasal pala is siya, barbershop, diba? So, mas grabe. It's a different na service, pero na-deceive yung client mo. So, again, it's also possible to file for trademark infringement. One good example of this is the Pinakurat case, no? As mentioned ni Michael, so this is our hometown product, the Sukang Pinakurat. And initially, di ba, hindi siya masyado marketed. It's already marketed sa Mindanao lang na area, but eventually they expanded their operations to include Visayas and Luzon. So ang daming, syempre, people who go to Mindanao, for example, for a vacation, they taste this suka and they love it. So yung iba, bumibili, dinadala sa Manila, etc. So, wait, what happened? Okay, so Dataputi actually made their own version, but they named it as Pinoy Kurat. And again, banking on the term. But the argument in the case was that even if Pinoy Kurat siya, it was clear, para bang the intention was clear that they wanted to enter into the market of Pinakurat. Diba? Para bang, yes, it's not to puti, but the mentality is you'll think na maybe it's the same as suka na Pinakurat, Pinoy Kurat. So parang ganun. So actually the original one, they managed to win the case against Dataputi, who had to abandon their trademark for Dato Puti, Pinoy Kurat, because similar siya. I mean, for us, for average person, parang pinakurat, Pinoy Kurat, hindi naman masyado, but the idea here is, at first glance kasi, di ba, parang obvious naman kasi ano yung gusto nilang gawin, which is to enter the market of pinakurat. So they lost that case. So pinakurat. Another important thing is, and this is one of the difficulties in terms of trademark, is if it's likely to mislead the public, particularly as to the nature, quality, and geographic origin. Ito yung medyo mahirap na i-defend or how do you call it, to disprove, kasi it's you have to have due diligence, paghahanap ka talaga. So an example, di ba, there's already this started na Cebu Lechon Belly that's already started. So this is going to be more of responsibility to ng LGU or ng province. Kasi halimbawa, may nagtayo sa Luzon ng Cebu Lechon Belly, pero hindi pala siya talaga taga Cebu. They're just using the phrase ba na, Jason's Cebu Lechon Belly. Of course, ako naman na customer na I went to Cebu before, di ba? I have expectations na, they're saying this is Cebu Lechon Belly, di ba? So, syempre, bibili ako. What if iba pala yung quality? It's not really as good as you experience it. Syempre, what's going to happen is masisira yung reputation. Kasi yung mga tao will say, hindi pala masarap yung Cebu Lechon Belly. But again, the difficulty here is dapat proactive ka in looking at the applications at the database na, someone is filing Cebu Lechon Belly, pero it looks like hindi pala yata talaga sila connected in any way to Cebu. So you have to find it. I think we in a previous discussion with this, we actually found, I think, may nagbebenta, not sure if the trademark nila, but there are similar products in other countries that they're using Cebu Lechon Belly. I think there's one in Australia. But if you look at the ownership, hindi siya Cebu. So may mga ganun, because it's going to ruin the reputation. So once you see something like this file, then you file an opposition na, don't approve that trademark because it looks like hindi naman siya talaga galing Cebu. So imagine if pumunta ka somewhere sa, let's say, sa Luzon, sa Cagayan Valley, tapos pinakita ka na car chicharon, di ba? Wonder ka, did they really reach the market there, or was someone just using the name? So may mga ganun na cases. So you have to be very careful about that. You also can't register what we call as generic names for goods and services. So for example, shoes, tapos yung trademark name mo is sapatos, hindi pwede yun, because that means no one else can use the term. So generic siya na term. You cannot use teaspoon or cucharita. So it has to be something. Maybe you add a different name like Jera shoes, mga ganun. But you can't use ang generic name itself. And you'll see later why, because generic, hindi talaga siya pwede. But surprisingly, there's one interesting case in the US where a company managed to trademark the word candy. And the question is, sige, sa chat, i-chat nila. Do you have an idea kung ano to na candy? Kung anong candy to? Ano ko muna, since medyo paano naman tayo. So they managed to trademark the word candy. Magazine. No, sige. Mana 2 guesses pa. So, candy siya. And they were approved, huh? They filed in the US and I think EU, and they were approved. Obviously, hindi food, di ba? I mean, that's given. Kasi if this was a food or sweets, hindi siya ma-approve kasi generic ang candy. Yung inisip ko yung candy ng magazine, sa Philippines. Actually, sa US, it's Candy Crush. So they managed to trademark the word candy for mobile games. So meaning, their rationale was that sumikat kasi yung game, di ba? I'm sure many of us at one point in our lives we played this, even for a short time. So sumikat, di ba? There was a time na nag-boom talaga yung Candy Crush. So they were afraid that people will capitalize on that. So they filed a trademark for candy, meaning any other thing na basta may candy, kahit hindi ganito na type of game, they had the right to have you removed from the App Store or from Google Play. So halimbawa, let's say Candy Towers. So parang towers, because the idea here is the people is being deceived by na parang, uy, the name is Candy Towers, so baka they're also being made by the same company. So diba, the mentality is there na baka there's the deceptive part mo na deceive mo yung tao thinking na it's going to be something similar or from the same company pero iba pala. So they managed to file a trademark for candy. And the funny thing is they actually later on abandoned their filing in the US, and the reason was there's actually a previous game, I forgot the name, pero may candy rin sa title. Nabili kasi nila yung company na yon, so meaning mas maaga yung trademark doon, so mas malaki na yung coverage nila sa word na candy. So wala na siya sa US, but sa Europe they still have the candy. But this gives you an idea ba na businesses in general, no, you have to protect your brand, especially sa mga new na businesses na bigla kang sumikat, because people will capitalize on that, on that aspect. Sumikat ka, they'll find a way to make use of your trademark name, no? With or without your consent. Okay. You also can't register what we call as exclusive signs that have become customary, no, in language. So, for example, mga French na phrases na famous, let's say déjà vu, unless of course you add some additional terms, pero déjà vu itself hindi siya masyado kasi common siya. Hindi mo pwede ma-trademark, no? In terms of symbol, for example, the high voltage symbol, you cannot use that in your business as a pag na yan lang. But if you add names, then there's a chance it can be approved. So yung mga common languages, even if different language siya, pero sikat na siya na phrase or word, hindi mo siya pwedeng trademark. So that's one of the rules also. Now, given that we know that, no, these are some of the things that can't be registered, we can extrapolate na, okay, so this is what's going to happen. So if I were to make a trademark, ito yung mga ranking, ito yung strength, no, sa different types. So if this is the type of trademark you're going to have, then at least you know if what are the chances of it being approved or not. And the weakest of them is what we call as generic. No? So this is considered as the weakest strength when it comes to trademark, yung mga generic names. And usually we have what we call as the two-part test na if, for example, is the type of service or goods determined in the mark, and without you actually explaining ba, makukuha ba ng customers kung ano yung binibenta mo or ano yung ginagawa mo without actually telling them, then chances are generic siya. Now, for example, pag hindi ka taga-Philippines, pumunta ka, sinabi lang sa'yo na punta tayo ng Jollibee. Will you be able to imagine that it's a fast food? Diba hindi? So meaning that's a good trademark. But if it's too obvious masyado, then chances are, so sabihin mo, Mandawi foam. You expect foam, pero pag punta mo doon, it's actually a furniture store, no? So that's also a good mark. But as long as hindi siya obvious masyado. But once it's really obvious, then wala na. That means it's generic, it's really weak. And as a rule, most trademark can be lost if it becomes generic. So for example, aspirin was formerly a brand, but laging ginagamit yung word, so wala na, hindi na siya trademark. Ito, what do you think that is? Anong product yan? This is actually a brand, no? But because of its usage, nawala na yung trademark niya. Any idea kung ano to? Diba? Linoleum. Linoleum is a brand. Pero when we buy na, diba? Bili ka ng linoleum para sa floor. So wala na kasi na common usage na siya. Surprisingly, we also have this. Escalator is actually a brand name, no? But again, the common usage nawala eventually, and it doesn't really give you, I don't know, it's not really the length of time, but let's say you have this product, in 1 or 2 years, naging common usage siya, the Intellectual Property Office can always tell na, oops, your name or someone can file for a request na tanggalin yung trademark protection mo kasi common use na siya. No? So I give some other examples. No? Sige. Ay, ito, ano to? Anong tawag natin dito? Okay. Pwede nyo lagay lang sa chat yung mga gusto mag-try. No? You can put in the chat. Ano usually yung tawag natin dito? Yes, it's bubble wrap. But yes, bubble wrap is a brand. No? What is it supposed to be? What is the product supposed to be? It's supposed to be an air bubble packaging. Yun yung tawag. Because the bubble wrap is a brand. But again, wala na. Bubble wrap, wala yung trademark. Ha? Yan. Tawag yan. Ito medyo, ano to eh. Medyo for US to. So this is a dumpster, which is again surprisingly a brand. So dumpster is a brand and the actual product is described as a mobile garbage bin. Di ba kasi kukunin to ng garbage truck tapos ilalagay na sa babalik na ulit. So it's a mobile garbage bin. It can be put anywhere. But dumpster, wala na common usage na, di ba? Throw your trash in the dumpster. Yeah, what are they using? Ano yung ginagamit ng 2 old ladies? Sige nga, tingnan natin sa chat. It's a thermos. Yes, thermos. But again, it's a brand name before because it's supposed to be a vacuum flask. Also, so if you're working, for example, in a company that's may product kayo, you have to be careful on how you market your brand. Because yun nga eh, sikat ka na masyado. I think in the Philippines, for example, no, we have this tendency also, not really on sikat, but more on kung sino yung the first time that arrived. And I've always given the example na for me, the best example has always been Frigidaire. During the 60s, 70s, you have the Frigidaire, which is actually a brand. It's a refrigerator. Frigidaire is a brand. But even today, some of our lolos and lolas, when they ask us to put something, they use the word Frigidaire because it was the first brand that came to the Philippines. But in general, pag generic na talaga siya, the name can be lost. Yeah, sige. Ito, some people actually use the correct term. Some people use the brand name. So, it's okay lang siya. So, we also use chopstick, di ba? Bili tayo ng chopstick. It's actually lip balm. So, again, for this product in particular, medyo okay siya because some people still use the word lip balm. But ang chopstick talaga is a brand. Wait, I think the next one is going to be para siyang surprise for some of you. Okay. What's that? So ito, careful to if you're planning to go into the food business, no? So we call that as a popsicle, but popsicle is a brand. This is actually a frozen ice cream on a stick. So careful ka, especially if gagawa ka ng frozen ice cream on a stick tapos you're going to expand to the US market. Because if you go to the website of Unilever, they actually have one page dedicated to this. That popsicle, as you notice, the R circle is a registered trademark of Unilever. Meaning, when you say popsicle, it has to refer to the Unilever product. So, hirap na. Magagawa ka, tapos sabihin sa bata, ano yan? It's a frozen ice cream on a stick. Kasi nga, popsicle is a brand name. Hindi siya. Actually, you'll probably notice this, no, if you go to the grocery, you really can actually see the word popsicle. No? If you actually go, you have products that like this, but you don't really see the word popsicle because again, it's trademark. So be careful, no? So what we're saying is here, when you have plans, no, Diba? Simple lang naman yung popsicle, but sumikat ka, then you have to be careful, especially later on if you plan to expand. So you have to be aware of those things. So yun. Surprising, no? Popsicle, yan pala yung popsicle. Who would have known that popsicle is a brand name? Diba? Paano na lang yung mga kanta-kanta sa nursery rhymes na popsicle sa Cocomelon. Hindi pala allowed yun. But the good thing is, there are actually ways to avoid what we call in trademark as genericized. How do you avoid making your brand from becoming generic? And there are some steps. And number one, you add the word brand. So lagyan mo lang ng brand. It doesn't have to be a big word, but my brand lang. So Lysol. So they added the word brand. Ang liit lang, but at least the trademark there is Lysol brand. So at least you're protected, hindi ka magiging generic. So even if Lysol has become a generic word for in some countries as ano ba to siya, is infected, they added the word brand. So at least hindi na siya magiging generic basta-basta. You can also add a descriptor, and the example here is Jello. They have the word brand, and they also put gelatin dessert, di ba? Parang Jello, the gelatin dessert. So you have a descriptor. So you add another word or phrase para hindi siya generic na. So in the case of Jello, di ba sikat na kasi masyado yung Jello. So what's happening? People tend to associate gelatin with Jello. So they put in gelatin dessert. They also put in brand. So hindi siya magiging generic. So they can retain the trademark. Yan yung goal mo kasi. You don't want your trademark to be taken away from you. And also, one of the case in the case of most countries, if you're the owner of the trademark, you have to fight na hindi siya magiging verb. And if you recall, some years back, naging issue to sa Philippines. If you can remember the issue na may company na nag-news talaga siya na please don't use our name as a verb. Okay. Anong company kaya to? Tingin niyo. Nagsabi talaga sila na please don't use our name as a verb because it is a trademark. Ano talaga ito nila, no? Nilaban talaga nila. Of course, when the news came out, I'm sure marami sa inyo natawa dito. Actually, Xerox. They were really trying to find a way to fight na hindi siya verb kasi nga mawawala yung trademark nila. Because the correct term is photocopy or photocopier. Hindi dapat Xerox. But I think medyo na they somewhat lost this fight kay if you remember Xerox I think was already added in the dictionary. So wala na. So hirap na to be a trademark brand. No? So they were really fight. So this was also the same problem encountered by Google. And there were actually people who tried to remove the trademark of Google. But Google managed to fight it off. Their defense was that when people say Google, they meant kasi na parang diba to search, to use a web search. But they argued na ang Google kasi as a product is a web para siyang website. So parang medyo na-defend nila content na they managed to retain the trademark brand. Kasi people were using the verb meaning to search the web, but ang argument nila, Google is not really that, it's a website. So they managed. But again, Xerox is a hirap, diba? I'm sure a lot of us is guilty of this na, ay pa Xerox. Yeah. How many of us actually use the word? Rare ang for photocopy. There are also companies that in order to prevent their trademark from being taken away, they expand the business. They put other products. So Band-Aid, for example, started as adhesive bandages. But it came to a point na sa sobrang sikat nila, people were calling it as Band-Aid na, not bandages, diba? Band-Aid. So if they allowed that to continue, there was a possibility na mawawala yung trademark nila for Band-Aid. So what they did was they expanded the business to include other products. So they have yung para sa blister, and they even have pain relieving liquid. So mas malaki na yung coverage niya, so hindi na siya nagiging. So they can argue na hindi lang naman kami bandages, no? So they can retain the trademark, and that's the beauty. So from what you can see here, hindi talaga the Intellectual Property Office will not automatically reject any filing. They're always going to give you or your company a chance to defend kung ano ba talaga, is it really can it really be registered or not? Is it really generic or not? So you have the time to defend. So that's also the beauty of the process, because they give you time to defend your trademark. Okay, so from generic, we move to descriptive. So you're not really allowed to trademark mga descriptive words. No? Let's say yung brand name mo for the sunscreen is sun away sunscreen, because that's what your product is doing kasi. Diba? Your aircon mo is cool and breezy. So you're not really allowed to use. It's a weak trademark and there's a chance na ma-disapprove siya. Kasi you're just describing the function, the features. You're not allowed to do that. You cannot describe that. So, sun away, of course, it's sunscreen. Diba? So you have to find a different name for that. So this is the fourth, no? So we're now to the third. We're going to the stronger na trademark. So we have what we call as suggestive. This is a bit distinct, but not really descriptive. So it does not describe a product, but it suggests it or references it. No? So a really good example for that is, for example, Microsoft, which is microcomputer software. So it's a suggestive name, and you also have Android. No, na you're not actually talking to a robot, but to an operating system. So it's a suggestive trademark. So that's a bit stronger, no, compared to descriptive and generic. We also what we call as arbitrary. So these are a word or image that already exists, but has nothing to do with the business. So as the company filing for the trademark, you have to prove that the public can connect the word to the company and not just its regular name. And this is one of the many trademarks around the world. This is a good technique. So for example, you have Amazon. I mean, it's the Amazon River, but Amazon is actually more of a product, no, platform. Of course, Apple, it's very famous. So it's arbitrary. You're not talking about fruits, but you're talking about software. So the word is common, Apple, even the image is Apple, but it's for a different product. Then you have Shell. Diba? Again, a common word, a common logo, and then of course Dove, which is a soap product. So it really depends, no, later on, as you can see, it really depends then on how you can define it, because generally the process in filing trademark is you file it, and then the intellectual property office, they will review it, and then they will give, if there are problems, they will give you comments. Now, these are the problems that we see with your trademark based on this section of the law, etc. Then you have to defend it. So yan yung process na yun. No? So you can defend it in like this manner. And the strongest trademark is what we call as fanciful, no? So usually made up word siya. Na hindi siya actually wala sa dictionary minsan yung word. You're probably thinking, meron ba ganyan made up words? Of course meron, diba? Kodak. Ano ba ibig sabihin talaga ng Kodak? But they're a photo company, diba? But again, in the Philippines, I think, naging ano na siya na parang verb. Kodak. Lexus is another sort of made up word. No? So it's not really a word, but they associate it with the brand. So mas strong siya kasi be a Lexus, di ba? Ikaw din mismo, di ba? If you're not familiar, if you hear what's a Lexus, so that itself is a strong trademark. Hindi mo kasi alam kaagad kung ano yung product. Of course, another famous is Pepsi. It's a sort of made up word. Hindi mo lang ano ba yung Pepsi? So that's usually your clue. So when you file for trademark, you have to really think, no, kung ano ba talaga yung gusto mo na mangyari. Is it going, are you going for something strong, or are you going for something not as strong pero yun nga, mas easier to defend. But again, pag fanciful kasi, so but be careful, no? Okay, baka inisip mo fanciful siya na word pero ano lang pala siya, para translated lang pala siya. So you have to be careful as well, because translated words na sikat in another language cannot be approved. So given all of this, one of the things that most people the reason why they don't file a trademark is because, of course, the cost associated with this. And in this case, I'm going to show you an idea. So there's a lot actually, but these are some of the costs associated with trademark. So generally sa initial filing mo, it's going to be sa yung nakalagay na filing fee. So it depends. I think a small entity is less than 1 or 5 million assets. But so you have a claim you have this amount. So at least you get an idea, no, kung ano yung mga i-expect mo na gastos. Usually it's only the filing fee, which is per class, which I'll discuss a bit later. And then you notice meron itong claim for convention priority. What this refers to is, for example, you have a friend that has a business in Indonesia. Sikat na yung trademark niya, nag-file na siya, may business siya. And then you want to have the same business here, no, with the same trademark name. So of course, mag-apply ka. So you have to claim for convention priority, meaning when you file it here in the Philippines, they're going to assume na para ba ang date kung kailan na-file niyo sa Indonesia na trademark. No? So nag-file ka na to 2021, yung friend mo nag-file siya noong 2019. So if you file for claim for convention, priority, meaning when it's approved in the Philippines, they will treat it as if it was filed in 2019. So at least, because remember, this is first to file kasi. Trademark is always first to file. And then there's also claim of color. And when we discuss this with clients, it's always difficult, no, because you have to decide kasi do you really want this color to be part of the trademark? So let's say orange, part talaga siya sa logo mo, so sinama mo yung orange. It doesn't mean, of course, na if may gumaya ng logo mo, but they used blue, safe na sila, di ba? You can still file for trademark infringement, but the idea here is pag sikat na kasi yung logo mo with that particular color, di ba? Mas madaling makita. So what usually the advice is given is, you file for 2 trademarks, one with the color and one without the color. Meaning, kahit anong color pwede siya, but since it's known to be in orange, then you also file something in orange. So that's always the technique. Bali, covered mo lahat, no? Especially if logo. So yan yung mga things. For the other parts, if you notice, no, there is also this registration publication. This is usually where most of the trademarks get disapproved, no? Because when you file, let's say you file a trademark, tapos okay na siya, no? Parang wala masyadong problema. The Intellectual Property Office, they will publish this. And the reason is ito-publish siya so that other people can comment on your trademark. So no, they can file. And there's been a lot of cases, even in the US, no, na when it reached this part, for some of them, instead of just being quiet about it, they were a bit noisy, so nawala yung trademark nila. One example is, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, no, yung sa ano, are you familiar with yung mga reaction channels? So there's a lot of that in YouTube, and there was this group na they tried to trademark ang word na react or reaction. So that's what they did. They tried to they were already in the publication phase, meaning pinublish na siya to give people chance to react to it. But ang nangyari, even before it was published or during the publication phase, parang kinalat na nila, no, we're filing for trademark for this word, no, reaction videos, etc. Of course, a lot of people in the YouTube community complained, and eventually they were forced to cancel their trademark registration. Kasi dami nag-complain. So that's also one of the things, no. Medyo underhanded siya, but that's part of the process kasi. So meaning if you have a really good idea, you can go to the database or you can go to the publications to see ano yung mga final this month. Uy, parang hindi ko yata gusto ito nangyari nito. So may mga ganon na cases. So sometimes to remember, if you see there's what we call as class. So this is from the NICE, no? It classifies goods and services. So depending siya. So if goods classes 1 to 34, services 35 to 45. What we're just saying is anong klaseng trademark ba siya? So for example, Jollibee, most likely part of their class is food preparation. No? So example, Ayers. Sorry, yung example ko na puro lechon. So Ayers. So under their trademark, their classification is food kiosk services and restaurant. So alam mo na yan yung business. And it's important to remember kasi there are cases when similar yung name, not ang logo but ang name, pwede kasi siyang ma-approve yung trademark for name lang if different siya na classes. So different siya na ano. So let's say Ayer lang, walang lechon ng Ayer yung name mo, pero you're selling furniture. So iba yung class, so pwede siya ma-approve yung Ayer. Of course, you don't need to use the lechon logo, but ang name lang na Ayer, you can file a trademark if it's, for example, a furniture shop. No? So okay siya because it's not in the same class. But if you're going to make a restaurant na Ayer, then most likely hindi ma-approve yung trademark mo because Ayer Lechon already has that as a restaurant na class. So same classes usually mas difficult. Manukan, if you notice, their class is, they're very specific, no? Poultry talaga sila. So they're really chicken ang ano nila. Not live. So fast food product containing poultry. And then also they have restaurant in their class. So specific yung ano nila, no? So meaning if you were to make you wanted to make something na JT's lang, walang word na manukan deal, for example, then it's possible. Pero wag mong, hindi siya chicken. Diba? Pwede siya na baboy halimbawa or beef. So iba na siya na type of product. So okay siya. Of course, there's a possibility na you're going to have to defend it, especially if malaman na JT yung ginawa mo. So Leia, if you notice, they put an even real estate, no? So that's their class. So if I were to make a soap, for example, named Soleya, it's possible na I would be approved if it's soap, hindi different siya na class. But again, provided na hindi ko ginamit yung blue niya na diamond color, ang word lang, tapos lagyan ko lang ng ibang shape, halimbawa. So there's a chance na ma-approve siya. Kasi nga, iba naman siya na class, hindi mo siya hotel. So there's no confusion there, no? Kasi Soleya Mactan Resort and then Soleya Soap, it's different naman talaga. Unless of course your trademark is obvious na you're using the elements of the Soleya Resort, diba? Gamit ka ng blue, na gray, pareho ng font, then there's a possibility na it's not really going to be approved. One of the important things to remember also when it comes to trademark is what we call as declaration of actual use. So while a trademark is good for 10 years and then renewable siya, within the time period, you have to tell the IP official, no, na I'm actually using the trademark. So there are some dates. And the reason for this is to prevent what we call as parang squatting ba. Let's say na nalaman mo na in the US, sikat tong brand na to and maybe they're planning to enter the market in the Philippines. So inunahan mo ng trademark. But pag hindi mo talaga, wala kang ginamit, pinark mo lang yung trademark, then the Intellectual Property Office can actually tell you na, oops, we will remove your registration kasi hindi mo naman ginagamit, wala kang proof. And when we say proof, you have to actually attach the evidence na ginamit mo siya. So some examples, for example, na may website ka or even pictures na of goods na andyan siya, brochures. Mas maganda if may receipt ka na andun yung name mo or copies of contract showing that mark. So that's one of the important things na you need to know, no? Kasi pangit kasi na you're just using a trademark tapos wala kang ginawa lang dyan. So hindi rin pwede yun, no? Para kang nag-hoard ng trademark, kumbaga. It's not allowed also. Nag-hoard ka lang. One of the interesting cases is in the EU. So an Irish fast food restaurant known as Supermac. So they filed a case to revoke Big Mac in the EU because they said na it was filed in 2012 and then as of 2017, hindi pa rin siya ginamit ng McDo. They're probably referring to the fact na the Big Mac product siguro was not being sold in McDonald's in Europe. No? So they filed a case and McDonald's, of course, they defended, no, we were using that affidavits, they had brochures, they had websites, but in the end, what happened was the EU, they actually ruled in favor of Supermac. No? So what this means is, although McDonald's later filed again, but what this means is any business can now use the word Big Mac. whether you're in the restaurant business or in the furniture business, kasi natalo sila sa name na Big Mac. So that's very important when we talk about actual use. And one of the arguments din sa Supermac was, yun nga, parang pinark lang na McDonald's for the meantime. Parang nag-file sila ng term for Big Mac pero hindi sila nagbenta ng Big Mac sa EU. Para bang they just wanted to monopolize the name. So Supermac managed to win that case. No? So that's a very important also aspect to remember. You have to prove na nag-trademark ka and ginamit mo siya. No? Hindi pwede na nag-file ka lang ng basta-basta. Another term to remember, if you noticed earlier, there's the Madrid Protocol, no? And wait, if let's say, ito, quick lang. Sana yun. No, ang mahal niya, no? So you have 2,500 per class, 5,000. So this is the Madrid Protocol. So bakit ang mahal? Because remember, trademark is territorial. So under the Madrid Protocol, once you file in the Philippines, you can now file another one in one language, pay the fees, and then protected into as much as 120 countries. So yan yung advantage ng Madrid Protocol or the Madrid system. So nag-file ka na sa Philippines, approved na, then you file through the Madrid Protocol, protected ka na in the countries that were signatory to this Madrid Protocol. So hindi ka na kailangan mag-file ng, kumbaga, file ka sa country na to, file ka sa country na to, kasi automatic siya 120 countries. So it's convenient, global, and of course, cost-effective. And this is, of course, going into the fact that you have plans for expansion, which is, of course, as we know now, ito yung nangyari diba sa Jollibee. They now starting to expand to other countries because nasaturate na nila yung market sa Philippines. So again, you have to have a trademark registered in the Philippines first before you can apply. So with all of that, though, we go towards the discussion. Why is there a need to file for trademark? I'm a small business, no? Why do I need? Because trademark, in essence, it protects your brand identity in the marketplace, and this is very important. No? And if you notice, no, during the pandemic, there were a lot of people who entered into businesses, so you have to protect your brand. Kasi pag sumikat ka tapos hindi mo na file, naunahan ka, wala. The people will think ikaw yun pero hindi pala, no? So that's difficult. And again, by registering the trademark, it gives the owner exclusive rights to prevent others from using or exploiting the mark. And one of the advantages is that it can help you later build an income, no, through licensing or franchising. So halimbawa, nagtayo ka ng bakery sa Cebu. Of course, maganda talaga yung, even if homemade lang siya, no, na you just deliver cakes or bread. Tapos sumikat siya. Tapos my close friend ka na, let's say in Iloilo, no? So instead of actually going there, then you can tell your friend, oy, tayo ka ng business, gamitin mo yung name ko. Diba? Para siyang franchise. Gamitin mo yung name ko, usapan tayo sa sharing, benta mo. So for that person in Iloilo, the advantage is, hindi na nila kailangan ng new marketing kasi they can market it by saying na, oy, this business started in Cebu, this is now in Iloilo. So mas efficient siya, and for you as the original owner, it's going to give you another stream of income. Even if, let's say, actual, you have a restaurant, sikat na siya, tapos parang ayaw mo na mag-manage, but the license is there, then you can sell the trademark to the new owner. Kasi di ba, ako din naman yung papalit sa restaurant mo, yung restaurant mo, sikat na yung name, bakit papalitan, di ba? But let's say yung reason mo is papunta ka na abroad, or you're really tired of handling a business, o ibenta mo. So, pag binenta mo kasi kasama yung name, mas mahal siya. Kasi kung ako may bibili, uy, sikat na to, bakit iibahin yung name? So that's one way also to have a good income or to increase the market value of your trademark. And if you look at the trademark filings, no, we actually have a good increase. No, we have 2019, 23,000. But if you notice, the registration is 14,000. So ang daming candidates approved talaga. Compare that for non-resident, meaning foreigners, ang konti lang. And then for the Madrid Protocol, konti din, mas malaki yung attrition rate ng local. But the good thing is here, in a way, we can appreciate that people na are filing trademarks, but probably siguro kaya ang daming nawawal na hindi na-approve. Kasi maybe yun nga, they're infringing on the current trademark or it's generic. So may mga ganun na cases. No, so basically for us in the IP field, one of the things why we always insist that businesses, MSMEs, for example, file for trademark is because number one, it shows a commitment, na you started this business, you're really going to move forward with that business, na hindi siya whim lang or parang hobby lang. And the reason we say that because when you file a trademark, may expenses kasi involved, di ba? Of course, magbabayad ka ng filing fee. And the fact that you're willing to spend for that, for me, for example, it shows commitment. Now, I'm willing to move this forward. No? Na hindi siya para bang one time lang na okay, gawin ko to ngayon, next month wala na. No? So that's one of the benefits that I see for trademark na. It's going to give you that needed motivation. May trademark ka na. And in addition, it also highlights long-term planning na again, this is not a short-term business. You're planning this for a long time. No? You started to 2021, hopefully by 2025, di ba? Meron ka, let's say, nag-start ka ng pandemic, nag-bake ka lang. So the fact that you file a trademark, in a way, it's telling people or it's telling yourself na, okay, let's say after 5 years, hopefully, my pastry shop na to. Parang gano'n. So planning talaga siya because the fact that you're going for a trademark, you're putting it into your mind ba na this is not something na after 2021, wala na, I'll stop. No? So this is important kasi para siyang business na rin. This is a business, and especially if you're getting good revenue, no, na nag-bake ka lang, orders lang, but ang dami na nag-order bigla, then maybe it's better for me later to have a shop actual. So that's one of the for me the important reasons for trademark. So we're going to wrap up. I'm going to give some examples, no, with some of the concept, the declaration of actual use, the first to file. So one of these case is the Le Cordon Bleu case. And Le Cordon Bleu is actually a French culinary school. No? So they tried to register for a trademark in the Philippines. This was way back, mid-2000. And then there was a local entity who filed an opposition saying that he already owned the name, and it turns out that that same person, graduate pala siya ng same school. No? Graduate siya from the it's Cordon at Cordon. Le Cordon. Graduate siya ng Le Cordon Bleu sa France. Tapos umuwi sa Philippines. Nagtayo siya ng own niya na business using the same name. No? But the problem was, he started using the same mark pero hindi siya nag-apply ng trademark registration. No? So he was using it but wala siyang in-apply na trademark. So what happened was, when the French school applied, initially, their application was rejected, and the bureau cited na they had no prior use and the adoption and use has to be in the Philippines and not abroad because they were already operating in France. However, when it went up, no, the ladder, the director general, for example, said that it did not actually require actual use in the PH, and in fact, the local entity was not able to explain on how he came up with the name Le Cordon Bleu for his company. Hindi niya ma-explain kung how it came now without mentioning the French school. And one of the reasons was that the IPOFA later decided that the local entity had unjustly appropriated the mark, meaning ginamit na without proper use. Okay, so the lessons learned is number one, you have to protect the trademark. So meaning kung nag-file pa siya ng trademark noon, it would have been, there was a chance na different results ang mangyayari. And as I mentioned, a famous mark will be granted registration because of bad faith use. Diba? Kasi obvious naman na he was in the same school, ginamit niya sa Philippines, hoping na yung same school na hindi pupunta ng Philippines. So that's bad faith. So bad faith usually is not a right. And the case also told us na prior use of the mark will not always be a guarantee of registration. So if halimbawa, ano ba yung mga sikat na brands? Huawei, halimbawa lang yung Huawei, sikat na. Hindi sa nag-file dito, tapos nag-file ka dito ng mark for Huawei, it does not automatically mean that you will get the registration, no? Even if ginamit mo siya before ka nag-register. So that's one of the things that you have to remember, especially if you're going to use something from abroad. So be careful about that. Another case is the McJoy. This was early 2000. The sound ng Mac, di ba? Even if different ang spelling, McJoy, McDonald's, para bang they try to associate it with a particular brand name. So nag-file ang case na McDonald's, it went through a lot, no, sa IPO field, it went to the courts, and eventually it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said na yes, the trademark for McJoy and device or McJoy had to be rejected because of these reasons, blah, blah. So in particular, of course, the case raised by McDonald's. Of course, so in this case, what happened, diba? Your trademark has been disapproved, has been rejected. So what's the best option? Your best option, of course, is to file a new trade name. So what happened? McJoy is now what we call as the MyJoy. So naging MyJoy na sila from McJoy. So that's what happened. So from McJoy na name, change nila to MyJoy. So that's the story of MyJoy. So bakit yan yung name nila? And finally, when we talk also about trademark, especially in trademark infringement, we also need to be careful, especially right now, no, medyo sumisikat yung online selling. No, diba? Ang dami na ngayon, whether it's FB, whether it's TikTok or YouTube Live. And one of the reasons was because of Facebook Marketplace, diba? Sumikat talaga yung online selling. And while there are no moves from the different agencies, DTI and IPO field, they're now trying to say na if wala ka business registration for selling products, they're trying to find a way no na para i-take down yung Facebook page mo or yung YouTube page mo if you have no business registration. However, in terms of intellectual property, that's a bit easy na resolve kasi okay, hindi ka na makaka-live sell. So what, di ba? If you're doing online selling or especially live selling, one of the things that you need to be careful about is you have taken down is actually infringement cases. No? So number one, either you're selling legit products pero wala kang permission from them, then it's possible that you're going to face infringement cases, especially if the company will learn na ang laki ng income mo for that. Also, if you're selling pirated products, then all the more problem when it comes to infringement. No? Kasi nga, especially if, usually kasi, when you look at the cases, no, whether in terms of infringement, in most cases, if maliit lang, the company will always, hindi nila masyadong no, parang they really won't bother with you kasi sometimes the cost of bringing that case to court is more expensive than actually. But if they really see na you're really earning a lot from that, then they're probably more than willing to file for infringement cases. So that's one of the things you remember, especially if you're in online selling. If your page is taken down, that's pretty much the easy way out. But if you're facing infringement cases, delicado because court na kasi yan. May money involved. So that's going to be really very difficult. Okay, so I think with that, I'll end my discussion. So I hope we had a fun time, and I'll bring it back to Jera for our Q&A.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Jason. Anyone who would like to ask questions for Sir Jason, you can actually put them in our chat box, or if you really wanted to talk about it live, we may also allow you to do it. Okay, but before Sir Jason answers your question, let's just have a little bit of photo opportunity. Michael, are you there? Or Noel can assist on photo ops. So kindly open your camera. kindly open your camera?
It's getting dark ba yan?
Yes.
Mawawala na naman yung internet.
Yeah. So, photo op muna tayo. I actually have a
getting dark
question,
na.
Sir Jason, but I will be giving that later.
Sige.
Okay, so,
Yeah, so please, those with cameras, kindly open po. I'll be giving you 30 seconds to open your cameras.
okay, 30 seconds smiling lang po. So, that's quite a short while, no? Smiling.
Okay, first slide na tayo. 1, 2, smile. Okay, next slide.
Andito pala si Sir Jerwell. Hi, Dad. Okay. So I was really interested about Trademark because I also have a Facebook page which sells reuse or parang yung giving books second life with another owner. So that was Batuta Crafts. But then I have to take it down because the name Batuta is actually very generic for Filipinos, for Filipino community. So I have to take it down and have to look for another name. Okay. By the way, we still have a couple of webinars coming in next week. So we'll be ending all of our webinars on October. So November, we'll have a late time to look for more ideas and planning. But for October, we still have 2 more webinars incoming. We have gaming and intellectual property, again, with Sir Jason Nieva. This is about games and this is about intellectual property. I think Sir Nieva already touched a little bit of this when we had our copyrights. And then after that, we also have integration of social media in teaching of literature by Miss Erica May in Cabo. This is all about her research on using social media in teaching literature to high school students. And for those who are interested about learning how to use social media in other educational ways or educational purposes, then this might be a very good topic for you as well. Aside from that, we promise that we will still be resuming our public webinars in January. So don't worry, maybe we'll have some reruns of your favorite webinars, or we might have new runs for educational and research-based webinars for everyone as well, both for teachers, for students, or for those who just really wanted to learn. Okay? Sir Jason, ready na po ba tayo for questions?
Yeah. I add lang yung comment mo kanina. You could have actually filed a trademark sana.
Yes.
But added a descriptor. Yun yan eh. Because Batuta is generic, but you can add a descriptor.
Yeah.
So it can be Batuta Artworks, ganyan.
It's actually Batuta Crafts. But I have to put it down because some people would call me thinking that I'm actually a producer of Batuta for police. So I have to put it down in that case. But on the case, because we already look into social media and Facebook, sir, does it mean that those with Facebook business or Facebook marketplace SME who never registered for their trademark would have hard time protecting their mark? Or just like YouTube, do Facebook have some provisions on the matter of trademark, or they really need you to like register to have some kind of protection? Because marketplace module of Facebook seems to be some sort of, we can call it like very formal concept of having people bring all of their goods to Facebook market.
Yeah, I think in the case of Facebook Marketplace lang, I think we just have to differentiate lang now. When we talk about trademarks, we're talking about brands. But when we talk about for example, DTI is going after you, that's actually focusing on the business registration. So these are two different things, no? So I can register a business, for example, as yun nga, let's say yung business ko is Jason Company, and then one of my products, for example, is Batuta Craft. So it's a different na ano. So in terms of Facebook selling, for me, what is difficult there is if you're selling yung mga trademark products, no, you're selling shoes, you're selling bags. So you don't have a DTI registration, that's one problem. Another problem is, what are you selling? If it's branded products, mas difficult siya kasi do you really have the permission to sell that? Infringement din kasi yan. Kasi di ba, you sold them. So difficult siya. Ano ba yung argument mo? You can argue na second-hand selling, but then again, how did you get? So ang daming cases, no? So that's also assuming that the products you're selling are original. But if pirated pala yung binibenta mo, so that's also going to be the trademark infringement case. So that's why I say when you go online, difficult. Wala pa, I think, in terms of that aspect, I think Facebook and YouTube, wala pa talaga silang features, no, to block it out. More of ano pa lang siya, may nag-report, take down yung page mo. Unlike, for example, copyright infringement na mas madali makuha ng Facebook and YouTube. So for trademark, wala pa masyado. It's more of you have to report it. But again, what we're saying is you have to be careful kasi hindi siya tulad dati, di ba, na there are people na they're selling pirated products pero limited lang. For example, downtown Cebu. Pag you're selling kasi in Facebook Marketplace, mas wide na yung reach mo. And then there are many people who can see what you're selling. So you have to be careful about it.
Especially for these live selling sessions, am I right?
Yeah.
Some of them are actually selling real registered and trademark products whom they are not registered to sell actually. So pwede silang magkaroon ng problema dyan. So
as I mentioned, generally, no, from what we can see as mga examples, sometimes if maliit ka, there are cases na yung company will not really bother with you. But however, there are also companies that may, kumbaga, they're going to make an example of you, parang ganyan. Tapos ikaw yung malas na, kumbaga, nag-random sila, ikaw yung napili. They're going to file a case against you. Ikaw yung magiging example in the future na para bang, tingnan mo, we were able to file a case against this particular seller. So careful ka kasi nga, if they decide na, let's make an example out of one of them, doon ka doon ka mahirapan. What if ikaw yung nanalo sa loreta nila? Oy, let's file a case against this live seller. So
para kang nag-guillotine in front of other sellers who are doing the same.
Yeah, so sila matatakot na sila, but ikaw wala na, ikaw yung ikaw yung nag-guillotine diba? So be careful about that, especially sa selling. That's why when we talk about trademark, you have to be original talaga in your product, no? You have to find a way. So kung magsisell ka na lang din, you try to find legitimate ways. It's difficult talaga. I admit that it's really difficult, especially for those starting a business or for MSMEs. But you again, you have to look at it in the long term kasi. But if okay na yung business mo, yes, Sir Roa is right na ikaw yung landmark case.
Ikaw yung landmark case.
Ikaw na yung lalabas lagi sa case na in the case of blah 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 versus ganito, ito yung nangyari. So careful lang talaga. Again, it's always kasi you always have to put into mind ba na, what do I really want to do with this business? Is this going to be a short-term hobby or do I really want to move this forward? Yan yung lagi kasi natin isip. That's what I always advise friends. I have a friend in Surigao, nagtayo sila ng parang pastry shop, I think. So I told them, file a trademark even if hindi pa kayo sure, because eventually what's going to happen? Who knows, baka may kilala kayo in Cebu na gusto magtayo ng same sumikat kayo bigla. Hindi, you don't really know kasi the business, what's going to happen. So it's always better to be prepared. So kumbaga yung gagastusin mo sa trademark, isama mo na sa initial capital always. Na ito yung initial capital ko, isama ko na yung expenses ko for the trademark. So it's a good business practice. Para if sumikat ka talaga, di ba? Why not? Sayang. So imagine mo yung MyJoy kung gusto na mag-file ng trademark sa new name nila. Mas may So we've seen mga examples na ganyan, no, na they had a good idea, kinalimutan nila, then some other people filed the trademark.
Yes.
So so sayang.
And this is also a branch of Sir Jason, no, that in businesses, it's best to have some feasibilities, and then you have to make sure that you will commit later on after you did the feasibility in such a way that you can actually protect your registered trademark as well as your registered right as a business owner.
Yeah.
So for
Kasi
those
that-
who are wanting to do small businesses, Sir Jason is here to actually give you
Because-
some consultancy.
because what we want no is it's this in terms of intellectual property and even startups, no, even startups, little startups.
Mm.
What we want you to envision is always na lalaki yung business mo. No, that's always the goal. So you're starting a business, okay, tatanggap ka lang ng homemade orders from friends for cakes, but if nagustuhan mo siya, if you think it's going to be good, then you have to envision na what if I'm going to expand, di ba? Para mga ganun na plans eh. Kasi I think I had this training before na parang yung example nila, di ba, na for example, some Chinese daw, they start small, but their goal is always to be, para bang you start with a sari-sari store, their goal is to have a grocery store. But for most, sa Filipinos na MSME sometimes, para bang they have a sari-sari store, they're getting break even, it's enough for them. No? What we want is to really improve the business atmosphere. No? Na, okay, when I start in a sari-sari store, who knows, expand mo, di ba?
Move further.
Yeah, so it's going to, of course, it's going to entail a lot of hard work, additional trainings, additional costs, but that's the idea kasi my argument has always been, once you file for trademark, it's going to put that commitment kasi nag-file ka ng trademark, sayang naman. Diba? That's 4,000 pesos total, halimbawa, ang pinakamababa is 3,000 or 4,000. Lahat-lahat. Nag-spend ka ng 4,000. Parang panindigan mo na. You file a trademark, then you do something about your business. So that's always the case. No? So no matter how small your business, file ka ng trademark kasi you never know eh. Baka bukas biglang may umorder sa'yo na malaking company. Diba? That's the break that you're looking for. Matataranta ka na lang kasi, oh no, wala akong trademark, wala akong ganito, wala akong ganyan. So always be ready, always assume ba na one of these days, you know, I'm going, if not, diba, you can always give it up later on. Like, napagod ka talaga.
Totoo. Sir Jason, meron po tayong isa sa ating participants who wanted to ask the question like, Noel, kindly let Sir Carl Jamie Bordeos to unmute. Hello po. Okay, so Sir Carl, the floor is yours. You can ask your question.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Chair. It's Ma'am Merla who's going to ask the question. Thank you, Ma'am.
Hello, Ma'am. It's Ma'am Merla Rosalado. So my question has something to do with consultancy services, as mentioned earlier by Sir Jason. So my question is, in 1993, I attended a short course on management consultancy course at UPISSI Diliman. One of the things or lessons I learned or was emphasized by our trainer was, in terms of consultancy, you do not advertise. So I just don't know after how many years if there has been change. Kasi speaking of trademark, like in my case, after retiring, I would like to put up my consultancy service. So I'd like to have something like signage, like Merla Cares, reflecting the acronym for my intended consultancy service. But I am having second thought that I might be violating a business ethics, which I used to adhere to as in 1993, that you don't advertise. So what is the latest development as far as consultancy service is concerned?
I think no, maybe I'm not sure about the background, but maybe, for example, in my case, no,
Yes.
I'm connected with UP Cebu. If I have to have a private consultancy, in my case, hindi siguro ako pwedeng mag-market talaga na, di ba? I'm also a consultant because I'm with UP Cebu. I think that's my understanding. But if for example you're retired, you want to enter into a consultancy, I would suggest that you file a trademark for your name, and then you don't really need to market it. for me is
Yeah.
you file a trademark because as you get clients, you get known, you don't really
Yes.
need to have an office naman talaga. Pwede naman siya na
Opo,
website
opo,
lang.
opo.
But at
Opo.
least the name of your consultancy is protected na. Kasi baka you get good business, may makita
Yes.
ba na, uy,
Opo, opo. By
marami
word
siya.
of mouth, your
Yeah.
clients will relay the experience that they have had with you. But also my point is, I'd like to have it there. Of course, when you're growing old, you're a bit sentimental or what have you there. So it's something like you have an ownership of that particular name, and it would be as conceived by the sample representation. It's going to be at home because of the restrictions of health protocol. But at least for people to know where I am and to be able to use my stationery officially, I'd like to have it registered. So would that suffice?
Yeah. Yeah, and the good thing about that is since trademark is renewable, makukontinue talaga yung name. So that's a good idea. So I suggest,
Renewable? How many years? How many
uh,
years?
it's 10 years, renewable every 10 years.
Okay.
But
So,
as
4,000
mentioned,
what is 4,000 compared to a 10-year guarantee that you will be enjoying the trade name?
so alam mo, I suggest na siguro I think I'll post lang in the chat. You can
Opo.
email me and we can discuss
yes,
it further. So you can
Yes.
email me and we'll discuss that further. Sige.
Thank you po, sir. Okay, so you found I can already set up a fans club here in Calbayog City with your school as the founder. Sige po, sir.
Sige, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Sir
Yeah,
Jason.
Diyan ako lang, I put it sa chat ang email for it.
Okay po. Thank you, Sir Jason. Okay, Sir Jason, naalala ko yung yung concept kasi maraming mga artists sa, 'di ba, if you have an artist circle, because we always do some gallery shows before. What happens is that some artists do not actually trademark their own proprietorship or art proprietorship. In the US, we have a common term such as LLC or limited liability, if I'm not mistaken, and the concept here in the Philippines is that it's almost an equivalent for the corporations.
Yeah.
So, sir, in the case of, say, for example, consultancy and sole art ownership or art workshop or art production ownership, can still be, on the case of registration for tax in BIR or something like that, this should be considered as sole proprietorship or just freelancing, sir?
Again, hindi siya kasi what you're pointing out is hindi siya trademark actually, no? It's business registration. Yeah.
Because you can trademark, but then you have to make sure that you also
the thing lang is the reason why you have to register lang a business name na it can be different from the trademark name, no? The thing that you remember is, as mentioned earlier, you have to later on, once your trademark is approved, you have to show kasi proof na ginamit mo yung trademark name. No? Hindi siya katulad sa business, di ba? Nag-file ako ng DTI registration. Kahit hindi talaga ako nag-start ng business ko, the registration is there usually. Unlike, pero sa SEC, di ba? SEC, you have to renew every year. I think. Pero sa DTI, sometimes, you register as sole proprietor, minsan okay na, kahit wala ka nang ginawa. But sa trademark kasi, after, I think, 3 or 5 years, you have to show proof na ginamit mo. Kasi you're not allowed to park the name. Para kasi nag-park ka lang, you're waiting, no? So, you have to find a way na, so a business is you have to register and then para yung trademark mo, may proof ka lang na, I was using this trademark. So, yan yung parang gamit. So, whether you're registering as a freelancer or sole prop, as long as you can find a way to prove na ginamit mo yung trademark. No? So it can be, for example, nag-send ka ng official letter using stationery nandun yung trademark name mo. So that's proof na ginamit. And then people also know na ginamit mo yung name. So again, for the participants, always make sure to differentiate ang business registration with trademark registration.
With trademark.
So a good example of this is Jollibee. Jollibee is the main company. Ang mga brands niya is Red Ribbon, mga Inasal, Jollibee. So, mga ganun. So, that's also what I advise startups, especially those who, yung startups na software related. So, I tell them, register this name, pero yung title nyo sa app nyo, gawin yung trademark. Huwag siya yung parang name ng startup nyo. Kasi it's going to give you more flexibility. Kasi what if yung ginawa mo ngayon is delivery app, but later on, nagawa ka ng, ano bang klase na app? Let's say, LMS. Nagawa ka ng LMS. Pag na-register mo kasi yung business mo, the same name sa delivery app mo, when you venture into the LMS, Learning Management System, gagawa ka ng bagong entity kasi iba na yung name. But if you make this one name, tapos ginawa mong brand, okay, my product is this delivery app, and then right now I have a new product which is a learning management system, trademark na yung kailangan mong gawin. Because all of that are under the same business. So yan yung, so malaki siya, especially sa food, you can have different trademarks kasi. Let's say, nagsimula ka na cake. Then later on, you decide na, gagawa na lang ako ng, I also enter into, barbecue. If you use kasi the same name, mako-confuse yung customers mo, di ba na, akala ko cake, ka lang, bakit may barbecue? So it would be better na you retain the trademark for your baking na products, then you make a new trademark for your barbecue products. So ganoon siya na na tricks on trademark. Kasi mako-confuse yung akala ko, ka lang, cake, di ba? Remember the time when, I think I also experienced it, when Red Ribbon actually started, there was a time when Red Ribbon was selling rice meals.
Yeah,
Not
they
sure if some of
do.
you.
Just like Goldilocks as well.
So there were people na confused, di ba? You're Red Ribbon, why are you selling rice meals? Di ba? Parang hindi talaga siya sumikat kasi di ba? Even Goldilocks, I think they eventually removed those. Kasi
put
parang,
it out.
or iniba nila yung name kasi parang, bakit ka, why are you selling me rice? Nga, you're actually supposed to sell me cakes. Parang ganun, no? May mga confusion na with the customer. So you have to find a way to do that. But I think at Julie's, they have the Julie's na, kumbaga pang masa, then they have, di ba, meron sila, I think, another brand at Julie's na, I think more of the, kunyari, the elite Julie's. I think may ganyan sila eh. So they have a different brand for that. So that's one of the things you have to remember. No? Especially sa food talaga. The food business has a lot of potential for trademark.
Very good example talaga for larger business utilizing the trademark would be the Jollibee group of companies. So technically, yung Red Ribbon, Mang Inasal, if I'm not mistaken, also. These are trademarks under that company. Also, the Johnson & Johnson's, am I right? So they have a couple of lines for medical products. They also have a couple of lines for toiletries and self-care products. So definitely their trademarks for these products are still under one business name, but they utilize they use trademarks to be able to distinguish one series from another.
Actually, Burger King is the franchise is owned by Jollibee. Ang Burger King na franchise sa Philippines is owned by Jollibee. So, but again, for an MSME, if you notice na yung isang example ko kanina da, so kang Pinakwarat, they started local. But over time, sumikat yung product nila, and they were smart enough to file a trademark early on. So can you imagine if hindi sila nag-file ng trademark? Pumasa lang sila na, sikat kami, a lot of people are buying.
Wala, pwede na. Unprotected.
So natalo sila na dato puti, di ba? So that was a good decision on their part. No? So but what we're saying now with access kasi to information and easier way to file, sa simula pa lang, pwede ka nang mag-start selling, no?
There's one question here, sir. They would want to have your thoughts, a bit of your thoughts on the ideas of trademark in relation to student publication or student works. I think this really has to maybe a huge impact, especially on computer science students who would like to do startups while they are actually students and doing some of their works. Is that even possible?
Dalawa kasi siya, trademark and copyright. But when we talk about schools kasi, whether you're talking about a university or high school, it's going to go down to the basic need na, does your institution have what we call as an IP policy? Diyan kasi lagi nag-aaway. No? Na, when a student, for example, makes a software, you have an IT course, gumawa sila ng software, binigyan nila ng title, tingin mo, this has a chance to be marketable, no?
Mm.
So the question is always na who owns the IP? Yan kasi yung problema with some institutions, wala silang rules when it comes to intellectual property. In UP, for example, we have set rules na in place. So, but for example, in institution na wala, and we've also found out that this is actually one of the ways to discourage innovation in schools. Kasi, di ba, halimbawa, yung student, ang ganda-ganda ng thesis niya. Tapos biglang aangkinin ng school kasi walang clear-cut na policy, di ba? So, aangkinin ng school. Students and even future na students will probably get discouraged in making really good innovation kasi malalaman nila na hindi naman kami pala mag-benefit kami. May mga ganun na cases na. So,
parang hindi naman maka-credited sa amin o hindi naman namin magagamit in the near future. So, bakit pa?
Then it's also important to copyright or trademark, especially even sa schools, no, yung mga logo nyo, especially if you're going to enter into para mga business. No? So in the case of UP, the oblation, the name UP, their trademark, para if gagamitin siya to sell items, you can enter into agreements, licensing, royalty, so para ma-share yung school nyo. No? So daw yung school nyo, tingin nyo, marami kayong alumni, diba? Or may alumni kayo sa Middle East. So nagbebenta doon, i-trademark nyo para at least kung sino nagbenta doon, siya na bahala sa sales doon, kayo, kukuha na lang kayo ng royalties. And trademark can help. Kasi kayo yung may-ari, meaning you have the right on how to use the logo, the name. So yan yung advantage, even sa schools. But again, it's important to have IP policy. So in the case of UP, for example, we allow student orgs to use the UP logo on t-shirts, for example, that they can sell to their members because we're working on the assumption na student orgs are basically non-profit. No? So yan yung sinabi ko rin before sa copyright na, but if these same student orgs, bibenta sila bigla sa outside, then papasok na yung UP. We will say, oops, we own the trademark. Para bang pinayagan namin kayo, no? Kayo lang, walang problema. Pero pag binenta mo na sa iba, then we need to have discussions on royalty. Kasi the trademark is owned by UP. Diba kasi usually sa student orgs, ano ba nangyayari? Kung magkano yung cost, yung nababayaran, di ba? Parang t-shirt and printing. So, technically, wala talagang, siguro may profit 5 pesos per t-shirt. That's minimal. But if ibebenta mo na outside, yun. So, that's important also for schools. No? So, especially if you're planning to make products na mga tumblers na lalagay mo yung logo ng school, that's a good practice as well. So, again, for schools and even companies, I think you have to have an IP policy. No? So, again, also, we'll also promote, no, na we can also help, UP Cebu can also help with that aspect. If you think you need help with IP policy, we can also help with that as well.
Okay, so for those who are from universities or schools here, and if you wanted to have consultations regarding IP policies, if your school doesn't have IP policy yet, no, to protect your teachers and also your students when it comes to their works, and even on the consultations of regarding trademark, no, you can actually ask Sir Jason, and Sir Jason already gave his email address at itso.upcebu@up.ed.ph. So I think that concludes our webinar today. So next week we will still be having our webinar on gaming and intellectual property.
I'll add lang for the gaming siguro, of course it's open invitation, pero be prepared, no? Kaya as Jera mentioned, it's going to focus maybe on gaming. So how gaming companies protect their intellectual property, what are the techniques, ano yung mga examples. So medyo focus talaga siya on gaming. No? So for me lang, of course I would want you to join, pero be prepared, ano, baka ma-lost ka sa mga terminologies na ibibigay ko. Yun lang. It's going to be another fun din. And also, again, as Jera mentioned, we're planning to bring this back next year, but we're also looking into maybe additional IP topics for November. So I suggest na in your evaluation, if you could put in what other IP topics you have, and maybe I can schedule it for November. No, kung ano pa yung mga gusto nyo na IP topics, then maybe I can put it on my November schedule.
Okay. So make sure to put in the evaluation the topics that you really wanted to look at or what you wanted to suggest us to have. Okay, so don't forget to evaluate. Sir Jason will be very happy to see your evaluation, and we will also be happy to know what topics you wanted to know about.
Also, I'll add lang dyan, no, na if the topic you're proposing is a bit technical, we can have a more specialized training siguro, no?
Yes.
And an example, for example, you want we can actually offer some sort of valuation or software valuation. So if that's a topic, we maybe we can have it as part of the not the LRC, but maybe we can have a specific training for your university or institution, no? Pag ganyan na. Medyo technical talaga kasi it's syempre yan yung concern nyo, yung technical, so it would be better na I'll just have that training with you and your institution. Yun lang. Okay, so thank you, TLRC. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sir Jason. Sir Jason, this is a very, very good learning experience for me as well. I know that I have already attended your seminars before, but still, I always see new stuff and always learn new stuff from what you are saying and what you are delivering to us. I'm also very excited for next week for our gaming and IP intellectual property webinar. Okay, hope everyone are also ready for next week's webinar as well. Kindly don't forget to evaluate. Okay, some few evaluation reminders. Our evaluation and processing of e-certificates are automated. Make sure to type the correct spelling of your name since this will reflect on the e-certificates. Also, please be mindful in typing your email address because it is where you'll receive your certificates. We suggest that you keep a copy of your response in the evaluation for you to verify if you have made mistakes. So always make sure to click send me a copy of my responses before submitting your evaluation. And normally it takes less than 3 minutes after submitting to receive your certificate. And should you not be able to receive it by 5 p.m. today, just send a reply message with your concern to the confirmation email that we send through msgalorio@up.edu.ph. And we will try as much as we can to manually send the certificates on the next working day. Aside from that, the evaluation link is open for only 15 minutes, so make sure that you evaluate fast, and we also make sure that you can get your e-certificates fast as well. Thank you, Sir Jason. Sir Jason, a lot of individuals said thank you from coming from Calbayog now. So they are now your new fans club.
Thank you. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sir
Jason. Thank you
everyone.
so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Don't forget to evaluate. The evaluation form is already put up in our chat box. Okay, I do hope that everyone had a good learning experience. I also had a really good learning experience right now, especially that I am also wanting to, trademark my own artworks as well. Trademark my own line of artworks as well. Thank you so much po. Salamat po sa pagdalo. Okay. Noel, may gusto ka bang i-trademark?
Resign.
I do have a business before. It's actually a little art shop and a bookshop as well. So it's very useful to know that. Sir Jason also had a lot of webinars before actually, but only here in UPC. And it would be really nice to find other individuals not coming from other universities, look into the consultations for IP and copyrights. Thank you po. Thank you po dyan sa ating mga viewers from Calbayog City. Salamat po sa pagdalo. Daghang salamat. Kanina andyan si Sir Cinco, si Sir Dan, at saka si Sir Jer.